Let's say that I was a boot manufacturer, I had a factory, and I wanted to get my leather at the cheapest price possible. How would I do that? Well, what I'd probably do was contact three, four, five different, you know, finished leather suppliers. And I would tell them, look, I'm looking to buy a whole year's worth of leather, but I need a really, really, really low price. And I would like your proposal within 2 weeks. So I plant the seed. I want a really good price. I get all the proposals in 2 weeks. And do I pick the lowest price one? No, I'm not done. I take maybe two of the ones I think they're the best. And maybe I think those companies could go even lower. So I go back to them and say, hey, your offer was really, really good, but there's another offer that's just a little bit better. Do you think you could lower your price just some more? And I might do that even again, right? So I'm gonna grind down my suppliers to get as low possible, a price as low as possible. And so I get a really good price, but what's likely to happen? First of all, the suppliers are going to go, oh my God, I'm not making any money. So when it comes to shipping me leather, it might come a little late. It's not going to be their best leather, and maybe they're short some of it. And they don't care because they're trying to make up the money for the profit. So I end up making some bad boots and having to discard them. They're defective and everything. So I end up losing, all right? So we would call that transactional marketing, and it's still done today, right? Where the buyer and the seller are trying to win, right? The buyer is trying to get the lowest price possible. The seller is trying to make the most amount of profit as possible, right? And they're going against each other. So it's a win-lose situation. Some people say zero-sum game. Hey, there's a winner and a loser. Oh, plus one, minus one, together it equals zero. And that's still done today, but there's been a big change um, overall, and it really came out of the notion of quality. That quality, could lead to relationships, and relationships could be more profitable. So nowadays, really the key of marketing in both business to business and to consumers is relationship marketing. The interdependence and acceptance of quality as a business strategy led to this, right? And so what it means is, hey, both the buyer and the seller need to make a profit. And a matter of fact, if they work together to try to streamline costs on both sides and improve, the product, they're both going to make more money. One example of this is Walmart and Procter and Gamble. All right, Procter and Gamble does the ordering for Walmart because Walmart worked with them so they could access Walmart's inventory and then automatically order products to ship to their warehouses when they were running low. Now, Walmart certainly had a say in what those levels were and how much, but it made it made it possible for them to experience very few situations where they're out of stock, and it reduced the cost for Procter and Gamble and for Walmart. So Walmart pays less, and Procter and Gamble still makes a healthy profit on it. So that's what you're trying to do in relationship marketing. So I guess what I would like to go over quickly is what goes into a relationship. And I don't think it's really any different than personal relationships. So the first question is, why do companies or why do people form relationships in the first place? When you meet somebody, you might get the feeling that, boy, something could be really good between you and them, and you may never ever get to a relationship. All right? And other times you may have either been in a relationship where you were just using the other person, or the other person was just using you, right? They weren't putting in, right? So the first thing is common or shared interests. So for companies, they have a common market, All right. So being in a supply chain, that gives them oftentimes common or shared interests. What else is important? Mutual benefit. So both parties have to get benefit, profit. All right. Both parties have to share in the good and the bad. All right. I mean, if you're, working with a company and they're not paying you very well, they're using you, why would you stay? Why would you want to stay? All right. So, you have to work together. Trust. All right. So, that's one that often comes up early. And then really the question is, what do you trust about the other party? What do you trust the other party with? And what you trust is that, hey, your mutual benefit, the profits will be shared, that they'll have your interests, also when they make decisions, they'll share decisions with you. And that's what you do in any relationship. Commitment. All right. So commitment means what? That you've actually committed things of value. So you really don't have a relationship if somebody just makes a promise. If I say, to my wife, I'll always love you, I'll never leave you, is that a commitment? Well, I guess I'm already married, so I did make a commitment. But if I said it to my girlfriend, is that a commitment? No, because I could have said the same thing to a woman yesterday. Right? So you must commit things of resources. So you're not in a strong relation. You can figure out the strength of your relationship by how much other people or other parties have committed. And then last, communication. All right? And, we've all seen usually older couples maybe sitting having dinner in a restaurant and they're happy and smiling, but they don't even talk at all, right? They're just happy to be there, right? So why is communication important? Well, it's important because the marketing environment, the internal environments for those companies, they're always changing. Relationships are living things. So, as there are changes and impacts, companies need to communicate. So they're doing the best job possible to serve, their common interests and needs. And, in business, it's a lot more common for companies to form relationships and then dissolve them, right? There's no stigma in that. Now, it's not uncommon for different companies, even competitors, to form relationships and partnerships. All right, so there's a whole bunch there. I'm not going to go through them. I mean, even Apple buys LCD screens from Samsung, who would be a major competitor for them. But it makes sense for them to do that. So, when companies form relationships, what are they after? They're usually chasing synergy. And synergy is a nice word to use in an interview and stuff like that. But what exactly is it? All right. So synergy just means that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. 1 + 1 = 3. It's not the team that has the best players. It's the team that plays the best, right? So it's how all the different parts work together. All right. And in business, where does synergy usually come from? Either, hey, you can get better products, you can join together with another company and get more customers, you have complementary products. All right, you make printers, they make laptops. Which is a poor example, but that's it, right? Sometimes it gets you into new markets, right? It was not that long ago where companies were looking, hey, to get partners over in China so they could get into that market. All right. The other part is lower costs per sale or assets. And you see this a lot with banks, right? So, hey, they can merge. They'll merge all their assets, all the money that they have and all the loans they're owed and real estate they own. And they don't need to have all the people working, all the accountants and finance people. They can cut them. So they increase their net worth and lower their costs. And of course, Wall Street really likes that. That's why they do it. But oftentimes you can, work together to cut your costs. But basically, those are the two main areas. We get new access to new customers or new products, or we can lower our costs and so forth. So it's really hard to do. Just for, like many mergers don't work out because of culture between, organizations have different cultures and how they operate. Some can be very traditional, buttoned down. Other ones are very entrepreneurial. People are worried about jobs and things, and it looks good on paper, but they're hard to execute. That's really a management issue, right? So out of this, one way to think about your company and what it's worth is the idea of customer lifetime value, right? So people aren't just customers, I should say, not people, but customers aren't just transactions. They're a stream of transactions. They're like an investment, all right? Okay, so we can invest in our customer because we view them not as a one-time transaction. And again, just look at cell phone service, right? All those companies, right? AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, it costs them $300 to $600 or more to acquire a customer from a competitor. And every customer they get nowadays, except for, people brand new in the market, is coming from a competitor. So it's really expensive, but for them, they can make it up if they can keep you long enough. Right, so a critical, measure of a company's success or what it's worth is how long do they keep their customers, and how much money do they spend over that lifetime. And so, when you think about it, all right, what's really important nowadays, in marketing is, hey, customer acquisition cost. How much does it cost you to acquire new customers? There's a cost to that. Right, and that's one of the questions if you watch Shark Tank, the sharks ask right off the bat, well, what's your CAC, customer acquisition cost? Once you get customers, you want to try to develop them, get them to buy more. Maybe it's upsell, get them to buy more expensive things, okay, or new things. Cross-sell would be different things, get them to buy more often, etc. And then you don't want to lose your customers, because that's where a lot of your profit's coming from, all right? And you need to keep them for a while before, you're in the positive in terms of revenue and profit. So, hey, what are you doing to reward your customers to keep them? And then part of this is the notion that you have to find out who are your best customers. It's not everybody doesn't buy the same amount. And later on, we'll realize that, hey, there's oftentimes a smaller group of people who buy a lot, and then a large group of people who don't buy as much or as often. And, yes, you're trying to convert the infrequent buyers to become more frequent buyers, but you can't afford to lose your key customers. Customer loyalty. Well, loyal customers are usually credited with the following, but there are times when it's not always true, all right? They provide the base profit that all customers presumably deliver, meaning that, hey, everybody who buys at least buys as much. But then they buy more, so they generate more profit because they're satisfied and loyal. Depends on what you do to make them satisfied. It also depends on the type of product, okay? They often cost less to serve. You don't have to do as much marketing. We can be more efficient because, Nike doesn't need to advertise you that much, because when you need new sneakers, you're going to go to Nike or whoever your favorite brand is. And they provide referrals to bring us new customers. And, for consumer businesses, it might be, hey, where'd you get those sneakers? Those look really nice. Where'd you get those clothes? Where'd you get that? Okay? And so when, and from business to business, when people are talking, different business people are talking, they'll say, hey, who do you use? And they'll say, oh, I use this company. These accountants are great. I really like them a lot. Maybe they'll switch over, right? They're willing to pay a price premium, right? Because of their satisfaction, they're getting a lot of value. You have more room, right? You have excess value that you can charge more for and still give them good value. And by them being loyal means you can spend more, okay, on the initial acquisition cost, because they're going to spend 3, 4, or 5 years as opposed to just one. All right, just think how much money you're going to spend on cell phone service. Right, if you spent on average $50 a month, all right, that's $600 a year. And if you had your phone for another 50 years, well, $600 a year times 50 years, that's $30,000. That's potentially what you're worth. So that's a lot of money. So that's why phone companies are willing to invest in getting new customers.